Be the moon. It's no secret that I'm a lot different than I was 13 years ago. Living with ALS leaves a mark. Sometimes those marks are outwardly visible as scuffs and scars and extra holes for feeding tubes, catheters, and breathing tubes, but there are also mental and spiritual marks. Repurposing my life has shifted my goals and expectations, but not diminished them. I never thought I would retire in my 30s, but I am learning to use the time I spent at work to be a better person, friend, dad, and husband. I am also learning to be joyful, even when I am not always happy. Spiritual changes can be less visible than scars, but not always, and that's what I want to share with you today. Last year I spoke about hope, and what your gifts and the ALS Association are doing to provide hope for those living with ALS. I still believe there's never been a better time to have ALS. I am grateful to Brenda and Melissa for the opportunity to speak again this year, and with their blessing, I'm going to talk about the spiritual aspects of living with ALS. By the way, these will all be photos since I spoke last year. It seems that ALS is often spiritually polarizing. Either it causes people to grow stronger in their faith, or they feel punished, or abandoned, and lose their faith, become bitter, or withdraw from a spiritual practice. I will be speaking from my own Christian perspective, which many of you share, but I think the spiritual lessons are still relevant regardless of which God to whom you pray. As many of you know from experience, when something difficult or unexpected comes our way, God's presence in our lives can be so tangible, as He walks with us, and sometimes even carries us along the way. I have gotten over feeling guilty that my faith has been strengthened by ALS weakening my body. Have you ever noticed that when you learn a new word, you often start seeing or hearing it frequently, and you wonder why you didn't recognize it before? The same thing has happened to me with scriptures about weakness. My favorite is Paul's writing in 2 Corinthians 12, and I think the Message translation makes this particular text really come alive. Here it is. Because of the extravagance of those revelations, and so I wouldn't get a big head, I was given the gift of a handicap to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. Satan's angel did his best to get me down. What he in fact did was push me to my knees. No danger then of walking around high and mighty. At first I didn't think of it as a gift, and begged God to remove it. 3 times I did that, and then He told me, "My grace is enough, it's all you need. My strength comes into its own in your weakness." Paul continues. Once I heard that, I was glad to let it happen. I quit focusing on the handicap and began appreciating the gift. It was a case of Christ's strength moving in on my weakness. Now I take limitations in stride, and with good cheer, these limitations that cut me down to size, abuse, accidents, opposition, bad breaks. I just let Christ take over. And so the weaker I get, the stronger I become. What do you think? There is something very subtle in the wording I want you to notice. Satan's angel did his best to get me down. It didn't say, "God gave me this to test me," or "God gave me this to teach me a lesson," or "God gave me this to make me stronger." It says, Satan's angel did his best to get me down. I don't believe that God intentionally puts bad things into our lives. He doesn't have a daily quota of heart attacks, divorces, and car accidents to give out. That's not His nature. I believe that God is all good. When He created the world, He set in place the laws of nature and gave us all free will, and it is that combination that sometimes leads to bad things happening to people, even to good people. There are many examples in the Bible, think Jonah and the whale, and in the world today, of God's intervention. We often call them miracles. He still does perform miracles, and I pray daily for physical, emotional, and spiritual healing, but I would feel blessed with 2 out of 3. But that's not always His style. If God was constantly intervening, they wouldn't really be laws of nature, and we wouldn't truly have free will. What He does promise, however, is that He will always be with us, and that He is really good at making lemonade. As Paul wrote in Romans 8:28, we know that in everything, God works for the good of those who love Him. So what does all this have to do with the moon? Let me shed some light on this. Just after the famous Beatitudes, the author of Matthew continues to quote Jesus, "Make your light shine, so that others will see the good that you do and will praise your Father in heaven." We can sing the song, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine," but there may be times that the light inside us seems awfully dim, or even snuffed out completely. This is when I want you to remember the moon. I used to sleepwalk, but ALS has totally cured me of that. One cold, clear night, shortly after I was diagnosed, I walked into our bathroom, and the moon was perfectly framed in the long narrow window above our mirror. I was struck with the thought that the moon makes no light of its own, only reflecting light from the sun. Yet it can be amazingly bright and beautiful. Although it is only 1/4 the size of the Earth, it exerts awesome power on the Earth, stabilizing our axis of rotation and pulling the oceans with tidal force. As followers of Christ, we should strive to be like the moon. Alone, despite all our trying, we can't generate light. However, if we dedicate ourselves to reflecting light from the sun, this light and love can penetrate even the darkest places on earth. If we focus not on our energy, but on His, we have the power to move both mountains and oceans. And that brings me back to why you are all here at this Trap Shoot fundraiser. The gifts you give are a reflection of the goodness inside your heart, and that reflected light will shine and brighten the sometimes dark world of families living with ALS. Half of your gifts will bolster the ALS Association and its support of both research and care services specific to this region. The other half will support the local VFW to keep it, and homes in this area, accessible for everyone. We don't know why, yet, but veterans are twice as likely to be diagnosed with ALS compared to those who didn't serve in the military, and 16% of people living with ALS are veterans. So, the next time you look up at the moon, I want you to remember that we are all called to reflect the light of our God, not by our power, but His. This is something that no circumstance, or disease, can ever take away from us. That's why I'd rather be the moon, than a star.